Jai Gurudev. Om. Om. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Gurave Sarvalokana, Vishaje Bhavaroginah, Nidhaye Sarvavidyanam, Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Vanamali Gadishangi Shankhi Chakri Chanandaki Srimannarayano Vishnur Vasudevo Bhirakshata Vyasaya Vishnurupaya Vyasarupaya Vishnave Namo Vai Brahmanidhaye Vasisthaya Namo Namaha. So we have come to the 10th episode. We thought we would finish by 7, and even at 10 we haven't even touched Krishna. It has been a quick, at the same time a long journey. We experimented quite a lot with many things, especially behind the scenes, and most things have worked well for us. See, starting something is different, but keeping the momentum going is another thing. I think from our side, the team has put in a lot of effort and put their more than 100% to give the best so that you have the best experience. So hope it's been worth our time and effort and worth your time for sitting through these things. So we'll start off the story of Sati. Somebody had asked, why do we not tell this? A very famous story. We missed it deliberately initially, but let's go back to that. So when we looked in the first 1 or 2 sessions, we saw that Brahma had a few Manasa Putras, and one of them was Daksha Brahma, who was born from the thumb of Brahma. So Daksha Brahma had 16 daughters. Among those, 13 were married to Dharma. And among the 3 were Diti, Sati, and Aditi. So we know that Diti and Aditi married Kashyapa. Kashyapa was the son of Marichi, one of the Saptarishis. So the children of Aditi were all Devas, the children of Diti were all Rakshasas. We know that also. Now another daughter, Sati, she married Mahadeva or Shiva. Now it so happened that Daksha Brahma was a devotee of Vishnu. Because his father was Brahma, Brahma was a devotee of Vishnu. So he was naturally a devotee of Vishnu. And also, he was not very happy getting his daughter married to Shiva. Because he did not like the attributes of Shiva at all. See, Vishnu and Shiva have completely different types of attributes. You know, Vishnu is always very regally dressed, very pompous, very royal, you know, very skilled, very polished. But Shiva is very, what you can say, crude, raw. He's very innocent, very pure, but he's not built for the society. He's not a show-off. So Daksha always felt a little embarrassed to invite Shiva for things because he felt that he was not up to the mark in terms of social etiquette and all those things. So what happened? He was doing one yajna, and out of formality, he had invited Shiva as well. This yajna was to please Vishnu. And Brahma and Shiva both had attended, they were all sitting, and Daksha Brahma, as a Yajaman, as a host, entered the Yajna hall. So when he entered, everybody stood up. And Brahma and Shiva did not stand up. Now, Brahma was Daksha's father, so he did not mind that. So he went and bowed down to his father. But then he was a bit upset why Shiva did not stand up, because Shiva was his son-in-law. So he had to respect, at least out of the respect of the Yajaman, or as well as father-in-law, he expected Shiva to stand up. So Shiva did not stand up. So he felt angry, and he had all this pent up, what do you call, I won't call rejections. He had all this pent up discontentment about Shiva and his daughter. So that came out at this moment, and he started telling all bad things about Shiva. He's a useless person. He's got no social etiquette. He's does not know how to come dressed to events like this. Or he's always surrounded by all deadly looking and ugly creatures around. All these sorts of things he started saying. Now, to be fair, you can't pick fault with him. Suppose imagine you had a daughter. Would you give a daughter to somebody who spends most of the day in a burial ground? You wouldn't, isn't it? So he was like any father or any father-in-law. He did not like that alliance, but somehow because of his daughter's insistence, he had agreed. Now he found a chance to degrade and put derogatory comments on Shiva. But Shiva did not mind. He was okay. That's my father-in-law. It's okay. So what? But then Shiva's main disciple, Nandi, became very upset. So it's like, if a movie star, you say something, movie star may not mind, or the politician may not mind, but the chelas will become very upset. So Nandi became very upset, and then he started giving back to Daksha, saying that you are a useless person. Who said you are son of Brahma? Brahma is the one who is the master of all the Vedas. You have got not an iota of the wisdom in you. You are not fit to have a human body. You are fit to be like a goat. You be born as a goat next time. And then he also hurls abuses towards all the attendees who are sitting there who are not saying anything. Saying that you all know what Shiva is and you are just sitting quiet. And sitting quiet means you are agreeing to it, because you are not opposing. So he starts cursing them as well, the attendees. Now Bhrigu, who is the main Pandit or the main priest for that yajna, he gets upset now. That I am doing the yajna, instead of focusing the yajna, people are focusing on these two people. So he gets up and he starts cursing Nandi and his followers. So basically it becomes like a parliament ruckus where everybody is throwing things at each other instead of focusing on what needs to be done. So Shiva feels very let down and he says, is this why we came for the yajna? And he just walks away. And then somehow they finish the yajna. Now many years passes after this, and Daksha Brahma is still not overcome this event. So he organizes another yajna, and this time deliberately he does not invite Shiva. Because Shiva is not invited, Vishnu and Brahma also do not take the invite to go to the yajna. But Sati, she wants to go because it's her father's house event. She wants to go. So she tells, I will go. Why don't you come? So Shiva says, do you not understand what is happening? He is doing this deliberately to insult me. And you are not been invited either, even though you are his daughter. So if you go there, then you will not be looked after well. So you should never go or work in a place where you are not needed. So don't go. So, but Parvati or Sati, she's not Parvati yet. Sati says, no. My father must have missed out or the post must not have arrived. So why will he do like that? Anyway, I have to go and help him out. So let's do it. So Shiva says, it's up to you. I have told what I had to tell. If you want to go, I'm no one to stop you. But I'm telling you, remember what I'm telling you, that you won't be looked after. I definitely am not coming because I have not been invited. And I know that this is deliberate. So then Sati goes on her own. So when she goes to the yajna, then Shiva said exactly that happens. The father is unhappy that she came and he is worried that Shiva might come. He's a bit relaxed that Shiva is not come, but he ignores his daughter. And Daksha's mother or Daksha's wife or the Sati's mother, she and her sisters, they look after her, they speak to her, they take her inside. So Parvati starts realizing that what Shiva said was true. And also to make things worse, she also realizes in that yajna, so when they do yajna, they have to give offerings to all the gods. So they have made a pot to give to everybody, but they have not kept anything for Shiva. So Daksha is clearly instructed that you don't need to give any offerings to Shiva. So this makes her very angry. So she is angry because her father turned out to be like this. She is sad because she mistook her own husband. She did not take the wisdom of her husband's words. So she looks at her father and says, it is true what Nandi was saying on that day. You are not fit to be doing this great yajna, to be an Yajaman. Only auspiciousness can recognize auspiciousness. Only greatness can recognize greatness. They haven't got anything new to recognize the greatness in Shiva. So it's good that you didn't invite him because this yajna is not fit for him to attend also. And she says, because I disobeyed him and I came here, I can't forgive myself. So saying that, she jumps into the fire, Yajna Kunda, and dies. Now, there's a bit of a chaos now. So this is reported to Shiva. The moment Shiva hears this, he becomes very angry. So he takes a hair from his eyebrow and then throws it on the ground. And from that, a very deadly looking creature or a soldier called Veerabhadra is born. So he tells Veerabhadra, go and destroy everything. Destroy the yajna, kill Daksha, create total chaos. So this is one question for you to think. Why does Shiva order destruction? Shiva is not angry at this stage. He is upset, but he is not angry to the stage to do a Tandava or open his third eye. But why does he ask this total destruction, even harm to people who are attended or just not done anything to upset him? So it is one thing for you to think about. So that's what exactly Veerabhadra does. He is good at it. He just destroys the whole yajna. He kills Daksha, cuts his and puts it in the Yajna Kunda. And then everywhere destruction is happening. People are running here, running there. So finally everybody run to Shiva and say, please forgive us. We should have not agreed to this. Please spare us. So Shiva is always compassionate. He lets them. He says, that's fine. So everybody is forgiven. And then even Daksha, he says, Daksha's wife comes and says, look, I know he was arrogant. He did what he did not have to do. But please forgive him. Let him come back to life. Otherwise the yajna will be incomplete. Shiva says, that's fine. He can come back to life. I've got nothing against him. But Nandi's word should also come true. So he will be born with a goat's head. So Daksha is reborn and is born with a goat's head. And then the yajna is completed. Daksha apologizes to Shiva. In the yajna, Shiva is also given a pardon. And all ends well. Everything ends happily. But Sati does not know. Sati is gone. The same Sati is born as a daughter of the Himalayas in the next lifetime, and she becomes Parvati, and then she marries Shiva again. This is the story of Sati. Yeah. Now we'll go back to the prelude to the Bhagavatam. So there are so many things that happen before Parikshita starts asking Shuka the question. Some of it we covered in the first session. We'll look at a few other things. So we all know that the main trigger for composing the Bhagavata Purana by Vyasa was the conversation he had with Narada. So these are the lot of things. These are things we need to cover. What happened before the Bhagavatam actually started. So we all know that Vyasa, in spite of all his achievements, were not very contented, and Narada came to discuss with him. And Narada was there to give a solution. So what Narada said, there was a very interesting conversation which happened between Narada and Vyasa. First, Narada said, look, you have composed the Bhagavad Gita. You have composed the, Mahabharata. You have done the Brahma Sutras. Can we go to the next slide, please? You have gone to the Brahma Sutras and all. But you should know this, that both Mahabharata and Gita are dharma and action oriented. They are mainly knowledge and action based. You are given very little space for devotion in that. Mahabharata also, you have told it as a history. You have described only facts and you have treated Krishna like a character, like anybody else. You have not given enough screen space for Krishna. Krishna is not the hero in the Mahabharata at all. Krishna just comes and goes like everybody else. When Kali Yuga is coming, and in people in Kali Yuga will be very fickle-minded. They won't be that disciplined or mature enough to pick up your sukshma of dharma and karma yoga. So for them, you need to give an easier path. They all need an anchor. Just knowledge will not support them. You know, this we can see very easily. Even if you look in the art of living, I have taught in both in the West and the East. There's one big difference I saw is if you are teaching in India or in the Middle East, there the focus is more on the guru. Whereas in the West, the focus is more on the path. So if you go and sit in the courses in the East, they speak a lot about guru. Even the teachers too, and even the students also like that. Because there they need an anchor. Their devotion is more dominant. But in the West, discipline and knowledge is dominant. Their guru is needed. It's not that they are not devoted, but their main focus is on knowledge and discipline. So they are more easily disciplined on this side of the world. So similarly, you are saying in Kali Yuga, people will be more fickle. They won't be disciplined, but they will need an anchor. So for that, you need to give an anchor like Krishna, whom they can hold and then they can surrender. And he says the difference between knowledge and devotion is like this. Knowledge, either you get it or you don't get it. You go back. But devotion, you don't need qualifications for devotion. When you get into devotion, the first thing the divine does is churns you, tests your strength of your devotion. Just like he gives an example and says, when you light a fire, first there is smoke. And then only the fire comes. When the fire lights up, it burns the whole fire. So in the same way, initially, when the people are churned in devotion, all the impurities, all the pain, all the sorrow comes. But when the devotion is steadfast, then the sattva in them comes up. When the sattva comes up, they are able to understand knowledge. And then they are able to progress in the path you have mentioned. But initially, they need an anchor. For that, you need to speak more about devotion. So just write more about devotion, write about avatars, write why divine had to come in the human forms, why he had to convince them it is possible to be in the human body and to achieve things, and how he's beyond the gunas. And finally, he says the key is may tell them that even if you are not disciplined, even if you fail in your action, in your dharma, you are still able to be liberated through devotion. Devotion can take you across. So this is the very interesting conversation which makes Vyasa to think. And to emphasize on that, Narada starts telling about his story. He says, I will tell you a story about my previous birth. Vyasa says, I thought you are born this kalpa. What is your previous birth? He says, no. This kalpa I am born as a son of Brahma. But in the previous kalpa, I was born as a son of a Shudra woman. So this Shudra woman was actually looking after the cows in one of the very rich merchant. And this rich merchant was very religious. So what he did, he used to always invite these wise people to come and stay with him. So once what happens, there is a Chaturmas, the rainy season. During this Chaturmas, a lot of saints come in, rishis come, and they stay in this merchant's house for 4 months. And when they are there, this boy is given the responsibility to look after them. So he starts looking after them. So he continues to look after them. He presses their feet. He gets things ready for their puja, for their walk, for their bath, everything. He presses their clothes, wash, all this he's doing. And also what he does, after they have eaten whatever there is leftovers of them, he keeps eating that. So just by eating the leftovers, he develops a lot of sattva in him. So then a time comes when they have to leave. So he's very upset that he can't go because his mother is here. He's stuck with her. He can't leave her and go. And he also can't go with the wise people. So the wise people say, we will give you some knowledge. You hold on to it and then you'll be able to progress when the right time comes. So then they talk to him about Tapatraya. You know what Tapatraya is? Tapa means heat. Traya is 3. There are three types of botherations. Tapatraya literally means what? Botheration. It says there are three types of botherations human being can have. One is physical, which is adibhautika. Then second one is mental, it is adidaivika. And then the last one is spiritual, adhyatmika. So these are the three types of botheration. The physical, what are physical botherations? I'm thin, I'm fat, I'm not beautiful, I'm dark, all these things. I'm not intelligent. These are all from the physical side of it. Okay, nobody likes me. All these are physical botheration, physical tapatraya. And the mental tapatrayas are, oh, I'm lazy, I'm not good, I'm not efficient. All these things are the mental tapatrayas. And the spiritual ones are, oh, I don't know whether I'm progressing on the path. I don't know why I'm not disciplined. Every now and then I get confused. I don't know whether I belong here, I belong there. All these confusions, these are the mental tapatraya. So he says there are three types of tapatrayas which will bother human beings. How can you overcome them? By knowledge, by witnessing, and by surrendering to wise people. In satsang, be in satsang, surrender to wise people, get knowledge from them, and be a witness to the tapatrayas. That will help you to overcome these limitations. So then they leave. After a few months, his mother, while she is working in the cowshed, gets bitten by a snake and she dies. And when she dies, usually people become sad, but Narada becomes happy now because there is no bondage anymore. Finally, I can go in search of the Lord. So he leaves his house, goes to the forest, sits under a tree and meditates. And as he is meditating, he gets the realization of the Lord. He gets the vision of Lord. He does not know who Vishnu is at that time. Then he sees that form and then feels very happy. But this vision is only there for a few seconds and then disappears. Then he becomes very dejected and unhappy. How is this? See, whether it is a worldly pleasure or a spiritual pleasure, if you have never tasted it, you are okay without it. But once you have tasted it and it goes away, then the longing or the craving becomes more intense. That is what happened to Narada. Until then, he never had this bliss of having the darshan of the divine or having the proximity of the divine. But now that has happened, he became very unsettled. Oh, it's not there anymore. It's not there anymore. I'm not having the experience anymore. So he became almost crazy like. He was not interested in anything. He did not want to do anything. And then he hears a wow, it's an Akashvani. So what it says is, so the Akashvani says, look, you only had this much merit in this life because you served so wholeheartedly for those 4 months, for those wise people. Whatever merit you had from that, that is why the divine could show you a glimpse of him. So that merit is exhausted. So continue with your practices. When you die in this lifetime, when you come back in the next lifetime, then you will have a much longer association with me. And thus Narada dies. After he dies, he is reborn as a son of Brahma and remains as an eternal devotee of Vishnu. So Narada tells this to Vyasa, saying that, look, I was only 5 or 6 years old. But even then, even though I did not achieve too much through discipline or knowledge, only through devotion, I attained this high state. So you have to do this. And you will not only you will feel contented and happy, you will also become an example to others. So then Vyasa sits back and then he starts recollecting where to start, what to do before the Bhagavatam. So then his mind goes back to the last days of the Mahabharata war. So what's happening on the 7th day? Mahabharata war lasts for 18 days. Yeah. On the 17th day evening, what has happened? If all the Kauravas are dead and Duryodhana is on his deathbed. So he's mortally wounded, he's about to die. And Ashwatthama is remaining. Ashwatthama says, make me the commander-in-chief. I will make sure all the Pandavas are killed. Now, there is no army. Everybody is dead. But in the according to the formality, he has to be made the commander-in-chief. So Duryodhana says, okay, I make you the commander-in-chief. Go. What you have to do. So Ashwatthama goes in the night when everybody is sleeping. He goes to the tent where all the Pandavas are supposed to be resting. So when he goes to the tent, there he sees that everybody is sleeping. So he goes and cuts the heads of all these people sleeping in the 5 beds whom he thinks are Pandavas. And also there he sees Drupada and Drishtadyumna. Drishtadyumna is one who killed his father, who is Drupada's son. Drupada was the arch rival of Drona. So he kills them also. And then he comes back. But when he comes back, he realizes then that they were not the Pandavas, because the Pandavas are having another emergency meeting in another tent. So he is very upset, but then what has happened has happened. He comes back and reports to Duryodhana what happens. So Duryodhana feels very angry. So it's very interesting that Duryodhana, though he had such rivalry with the Pandavas, he loved their children. He had no enmity against them. So when he learned that because of a mistake all the Pandavas' children were killed, he became very angry at Ashwatthama. So he tells Ashwatthama, you should not have done this. And he condemns Ashwatthama very seriously and then prays for the Pandavas' children, the Upa Pandavas' souls to go to the heaven. So he prays sincerely for them. He says, even whatever my merit is there, let it go to them and let them go to heaven. They had such a long life which was cut short by his ignorance, and because I gave him the power to do it, I am also responsible. So saying that, he dies. So when he dies, it is said because at the end moment of his death, he was so pious. In spite of all the action before that, he went to heaven. This once again goes to state that the last moments of your life are so much more important than the rest of your life. Yeah, the other parts also important. Last moments, you need to have that awareness to die in nobility. Most people die in fear, in anxiety, in unconscious state. But when you die with a very noble thought in your heart and with a very noble intention, all your past sins are eliminated. So Duryodhana says it goes to heaven. Now the next day morning when they realize that this is what has happened. Everybody is upset. Krishna is upset. All the Pandavas upset. Bhima is very angry. Draupadi is angry as well. So they order, go and find Ashwatthama. So Duryodhana, Arjuna goes. He finds him because he's not trying to run away. He knows where he is. He's also upset that he did this. But then he can't kill him because whenever he sees Ashwatthama, he sees his guru in him. So he feels very uncomfortable killing him, even though his son has been killed by him. So he imprisons him and brings him to Draupadi. And says, Draupadi, here is whatever you want to do. So Bhima is ready to kill him. But then Draupadi says, she's also a bit calmed down by that time. She says, no, what I am experiencing, his mother will experience if he gets killed. So Kripi is the wife of Drona and daughter of Kripacharya. Kripi will go to the same anguish which I am going. And moreover, he is the son of all of our gurus. So just leave him. So whatever happens, his karma will affect him. Ashwatthama had this crown jewel on his head. That crown jewel was the source of all his power, knowledge, talent, everything. So Krishna gives Arjuna a signal. So Arjuna just chops that off, takes it off Ashwatthama. So then all his talent, knowledge, power, everything is gone, but he stays immortal. So he stays immortal, but he lives with ignorance, with disease. And he said that even today Ashwatthama is roaming somewhere with body full of diseases. So Ashwatthama is gone. Now the war has ended officially. The Pandavas have won. So all the family who were in Hastinapura, who are not fighting, they all come to the battlefield. So they all come searching for their husbands, for their children. And the same way, Kunti comes, Gandhari comes, and Dhritarashtra, Sanjaya, all of them are here. So Gandhari is very upset because all her 100 children are dead. So he comes to Krishna and she tells him, Krishna, you could have saved one son for me. Out of 100, you could have saved at least one. Krishna doesn't say anything. He just keeps quiet. Then everybody has to leave. They all want to go because it's getting dark. But Gandhari says, no, I'm not coming. I can't leave my children here. So I will sit here. I will spend some time here. And when I feel like, I will come. So Krishna tries to cajole her and say, look, what has happened has happened. That is how it was supposed to happen. She does not listen. So she is left and they all go. Before going, she tells Krishna, you know how much pain I am in. How do I overcome this pain? So Krishna tells her, you can overcome pain by 3 ways. One is through knowledge. When you realize that what dies is just the physical body and not you. When you have the Atma Gyan, that will reduce your sorrow. If you don't have that, time will reduce the sorrow. If you even can't wait for time, then another sorrow which is bigger than this sorrow will help you to work. Only through another bigger sorrow you can overcome this sorrow. So saying that, they all leave her and they go. So she waits a few hours there. It's already dark. It's close to midnight. Now she starts feeling hungry. So she has to eat something. So she's closed her eyes so she can't see for food. So she smells a ripe mango nearby. So she has to go and eat that mango. So she follows the scent, and then when she comes near that, she tries to jump. She can't reach it. So she tries to pile up the stones so she can climb on the heap of stones, and that's what she piles up. Through her legs, she piles up all the rocks around. She climbs on them and then reaches the mango, picks the mango. She has half eaten the mango when her leg slips on the heap, and then she falls down. When she falls down, what you do when you fall down? You keep your hand for rest. So when she lets her hand fall down, her hand rests on something. She thinks it is a rock, but actually it is somebody's head. And then she suddenly becomes aware, am I standing on somebody's head or some rocks? So she starts feeling around. So what has actually happened is she is just standing on a pile of heads which were killed. And when she starts feeling the head, she feels that they are her own children. Because her sense of touch is so strong, because she was not seeing, she could feel the heads and face and could feel they are my own children. Then that is when her sorrow becomes even worse. He says, Krishna, I knew that you said that you need a greater sorrow to overcome this sorrow. This is a much greater sorrow, but you didn't have to make it true so quickly. I know this is all you are doing. See, for a parent, seeing a child die itself is a worst pain, especially for a mother. But if you have 100 children, all of them are dead, it is quite an unbearable pain. And on top of it, you have accumulated, you have piled up the heads of your own children and climbed that to quench your hunger. That will hurt like anything. So she was so upset. She cursed Krishna. She said, Krishna, your entire clan will be destroyed. They are not worth living. So because of the pain you have caused me, I hereby curse you that your entire clan will be destroyed. The Yadu clan will be completely destroyed, which includes Krishna himself. So then everybody comes to Hastinapura. Yudhishthira again is very gloomy, very upset. He's very sad. He started thinking, what's the point of all this? So many people were killed. So many became orphans. So many lost their children. And this whole land is now red in blood. What did I achieve by doing? I should have just given away. So no matter what Krishna says, no matter what anybody says, he's inconsolable. He's getting into depression. So Krishna says, come, let's go and meet Bhishma. His Uttarayana is approaching. He's going to be leaving his body soon. So Krishna takes him to Bhishma and tells him, look, you need to console him. So Yudhishthira goes to Bhishma, apologizes to him and says, look, I could have avoided, I didn't do it. I'm really sorry. I take responsibility for all this. Then Bhishma says, no, don't do that. You did what Krishna told, and Krishna is divine. Only 2 people so far knew that about Krishna's true form. One is Kapila, other is Vyasa. only Narada, only these two people knew. So I knew as well. But you now know that you have only followed Krishna's order. So if he has done, it should be dharma only. So don't worry. And then Krishna asks Bhishma to teach Yudhishthira the Raja Dharma. What are the ethics of a king? How you should rule a kingdom? So there is an elaborate text on Raja Dharma which Bhishma tells, which imparts to Yudhishthira and also imparts Vishnu Sahasranama. Why he imparts Vishnu Sahasranama? After getting all this knowledge, Yudhishthira asks Bhishma, well, all this is okay to be a successful king, but how will the emptiness inside the soul be quenched? Then Bhishma says, yes, it can be quenched by the Nama Sankirtana. And who better to tell? There is Krishna next to you. He is the ultimate Purusha. His 1,000 names, if you say, all the sins will be destroyed. And then he gives the Vishnu Sahasranama. And he also turns to Krishna and says, usually people want to think about God when they are dying. I am so grateful that I have you, the God, standing next to me while I am dying. So saying that, he leaves his body in Uttarayana. So Bhishma is gone. Then what happens? Parikshita is born now. We all know the Parikshita story. Parikshita is born. And Yudhishthira is advised to do an Ashwamedha Yaga. So he agrees to do the Ashwamedha Yajna. And in what to do in the Ashwamedha Yajna is they let a horse roam free, whichever kingdom it enters. It can graze. If the king allows it to graze, it means he has accepted the superiority of Yudhishthira. If he ties the horse, that means he does not accept, he has to fight. So something like that. So one of the princes will follow the horse. So Arjuna this time keeps following the horse. So it goes from kingdom to kingdom to kingdom. It goes to Kandahar. Kandahar is Gandhara, or Gandhara is today's Kandahar in Afghanistan, where Gandhari came from. So near that Gandhara, there is another place where a sage is meditating. And to reach his ashrama, there is a small stream or a river to cross. And to his surprise, Arjuna sees that the horse is actually walking on the water without any problem. He runs behind, he is also able to walk on the water. Then they cross and then they go to the other side. There is a sage who is meditating. His name is Bakadalabhya. So Arjuna bows down to him and asks, how is this happening? How could I walk on the water? So he says, see, long time ago, I wanted to become very great and famous. So I meditated upon Indra. So Indra was pleased. He came to me and asked, what do you want? He said, I want to be great. He said, what greatness you want? I said, I want to be as great as you. Then Indra says, okay, you can be as great as me, but why are you stopping there? There is somebody greater than me. So he asks, who is greater than you? So Indra takes him to Brahma. And then Brahma says, there is somebody greater than me. Who is greater than me? Brahma has 4 heads. He takes to another Brahma who has got 8 heads. Then he takes to another Brahma with 12 heads. Like this, it goes on till they reach a Brahma with 64 heads. And then the Brahma with 64 heads takes him to Vishnu. So he is the ultimate. Then Vishnu says, why did you have to spend so much time and effort and time to ultimately come to me? I am there where you are as Krishna. You could have just come and met me there. Then he realizes, one, how small he is and how many layers of highness is there to go to Vishnu. And Krishna has been so humbly doing all sorts of things in the world, being a servant, being a charioteer. So that brings enormous humility in him. And because of that humility, he gets this power that whoever comes close to him, they will get all these siddhis. The siddhis happen, they can walk on water because of his power of tapas. So this is another short side story. So finally, everybody accepts Yudhishthira's supremacy. The Ashwamedha Yajna is there. At the same time, Krishna is given the Agra Puja this time as well. And then Krishna is supposed to leave. So when he is about to leave, 2 farmers come to the court asking for some support. So what has happened is, there is farmer A and farmer B. So farmer A has sold his land to farmer B. So the farmer B after a month or so, starts tilling the land, and then he finds a pot of gold. So he takes the pot of gold and brings it back to the original owner, A, and gives it to him and tells him, look, I found it in your land, please take it. And the farmer says, well, I've already sold the land to you. So whatever you get, that is yours only, you take it. So he says, no, you only sold the land. The gold you didn't sell. The gold originally belonged to you, should keep it. So like this, they are fighting with each other. You take it, you take it, you take it, you take it. Yudhishthira does not know how to sort this. So he asks Krishna. Krishna says, don't worry. Ask them to come back in 3 months. Then it will be easier to solve this. So he says, okay, leave the pot of gold here. Go back, come back after 3 months. Then we will sort this out. Then Yudhishthira asks him, what did you say? What will happen in 3 months? He says, you watch and see. In 3 months, Kali Yuga would have come in. And once Kali Yuga is there, you will see now the people who are fighting to give away the gold will start fighting to keep the gold. Then Yudhishthira says, is that so? What will happen in Kali Yuga? Then Krishna elaborates all the things that you will notice in Kali Yuga. So, what does he say? He says, first thing is, man will not live for wisdom. Man will start living for pleasure. Children will not respect elders, and they will also abandon responsibility. Women will start to behave like men. Are you relating to all this that is happening around? So this is what Krishna says will happen in Kali Yuga. Humans will copulate like beasts. Lust becomes such a strong driving force. People will be able to go to any extent to fulfill their lust. Power will dominate justice. For the sake of power, people will be able to keep the justice away. Nobody will stand for sacrifice. Sacrifice will be forgotten. True love and true caring and compassion for everybody will be ridiculed. Victim becomes a victimizer. Somebody becomes a victim. He does not repent or does not surrender to the strong person, but he waits for an opportunity. When he gets an opportunity, he inflicts the same pain on somebody else. So the victim becomes victimizer. He says, these are the things which will happen in Kali Yuga. And then he goes on. Right now, all the dharma was with the Pandavas. And I held them together. You won the war because the dharma was with you. Yudhishthira had, in the Dwapara Yuga, Yudhishthira had 1/4 or 20% of dharma. No, Yudhishthira had 25%. Yudhishthira had 1/4. Bhima had 1/4. Arjuna had 1/4. Nakula, Sahadeva together they had 1/4. So the 100% of dharma stayed with them. And it was held together by Krishna and Krishna. Draupadi and Krishna both held them together. Once Kali Yuga comes, what happens? Arjuna will lose his share and he will become manipulative. Bhima will have all his focus only on eating. Nakula will surrender to pleasure. Sahadeva will surrender to arrogance. So only Yudhishthira will remain in dharma. So dharma will be sidelined. Only greed and pleasure will take over. And saying this, what Krishna does, he takes Arjuna, and with Arjuna he goes to Dwaraka. So now Kali, now Arjuna is gone and Krishna is gone. Now what happens at this time? Vidura comes back. See, Vidura had gone. No, before this what happens? Now Parikshita is born. Parikshita is born, we are told already. When Krishna goes initially, after Parikshita is born, before coming to the Ashwamedha, he speaks to Kunti. Okay, before telling bye-bye, he tells her, Kunti asks for a wish. You know what Kunti asks? She says, we had so much trouble from the beginning in our lives until now, but we had one great thing. The great thing was we were able to spend a lot of time with you, and which is our greatest privilege. So I ask you for a wish. Make sure we are never comfortable in life. Make sure there is always some pain in our life so that you can always be with us. So Krishna says, don't worry, I will always be for you. And then he leaves. So then the Ashwamedha happens. After Ashwamedha, he leaves with Arjuna. And then Vidura comes back. Vidura had left before the war. So he comes back after 35 years. So a war has happened. Yudhishthira is the king. The kingdom is being ruled. And he comes because he misses his elder brother, Dhritarashtra. So he comes to Dhritarashtra and then he tells him, why are you still sitting in the palace? You have got no reason to be here. One, you haven't got a house. This is not your house. You are living in somebody else's house. This is borrowed house. You are eating the begged food. It is not your food. You are not earning it. Neither are your children giving it. Somebody else is giving this food for you. You are neither in your parents' house. You are neither in your children's house. And you haven't got any siblings also next to you. So what is the point of being here? So he convinces him to at least now go and take the Vanaprastha. So Dhritarashtra, Kunti and Gandhari leave the palace and they go to the forest and then they die in the forest. Vidura goes for another pilgrimage. So this is all happened. And then on the other side, what is happening? Krishna had a son. His name was Samba. Samba was very arrogant. So all this, what is happening now is the time for everything to be wound up. Everything is coming to a close. Krishna realizes the time has come for him to leave. All that he had to do, he has done. Dharma has been established. So Samba is just an excuse. What Samba does, he dresses himself as a pregnant lady and then goes to an ashram where rishis are meditating. So he goes and says, bows down to them and says, I want to know, what will I have, a boy or a girl? The rishis know by their power that he is just playing a game. So he says, you will neither have a boy nor a girl. You will give birth to a deadly iron rod. So true to their words, a large, heavy iron rod falls out of his thigh. He does not know what to do. So he takes it to his guru and asks him, what should I do with this? And the guru says, this is the most dangerous one. You just make it into fine pieces, make it into dirt, like powder. Powder is the whole thing and then shed it in the sea. So he does the same thing. He powders everything. He powders everything except the tip of it. He couldn't powder. You want to powder something, you need to hold to powder. So what he was holding, that he cannot powder. So he throws that away like that. So, but what happens? That part which was the solid part is eaten by a fish, whereas all the powder gets washed to the shore by the waves. And the wind comes at the same time. And what happens? All the grass which is on the shore, it gets stuck, this iron gets stuck, the particles on get stuck to this, what you call, the grass shoots are there, tall ones. Now what is happening in the Yadu clan? Krishna realizes that the sea is going to come up and it will engulf Dwaraka. So he asks everybody to leave Dwaraka and come to Prabhasa. Prabhasa is another area. So when they are coming towards Prabhasa, you know, the Yadus, some of them fought for Kauravas, some of them fought for Pandavas. So then the small argument starts between them that no, Kauravas were right, no, Pandavas were right, there was cheating, there was no cheating. And this becomes a big argument. And it becomes such a big argument, they start fighting with each other using their weapons. Now, Balarama and Krishna, so some way they will hide all the weapons so they don't kill each other. But then they start fighting with their fists and their hands. And finally, they will start taking those grass weeds, you know, the grass shafts which had this iron sprinkled on them, and they start using them as weapons. And using them as weapons, Yadavas self-destruct. All Yadavas are killed. Balarama feels very sorry, so he leaves his body and he also leaves the world. The only person who is remaining is Krishna. So Krishna is in Prabhasa, which is his favorite place. He's sitting there And then he is once again thinking about all that has happened all this time. And at that time, a hunter, he looks at his feet and thinks it is a ear of a deer and shoots. And that hits Krishna's toe. Now, how did this hunter, or what happened? What is the arrow that the hunter used? That initial solid which was thrown into the sea, which a fish swallowed, that fish was caught by the hunter. And then in its stomach, he found it's a very powerful and sharp iron piece. He made it as the head of his arrow. And then he used that to hit Krishna's toe. So then slowly Gandhari's curse was coming true, and Krishna had to leave his body. And before leaving his body, before departing from the world, Krishna wants to meet Uddhava. Uddhava is his disciple from his childhood, who is following Krishna everywhere. So he comes to Uddhava and tells Uddhava, look, you go and meditate, you will also get liberated. And Uddhava does not want to. He asks, give me some knowledge. And then at that time, Krishna gives the Uddhava Gita. He talks about Uddhava Gita, he talks about a different type of jnana. He talks about Avadhuta Gita is also called. It talks about quite a lot of things that we will see another time. And after giving that knowledge, he promises him that he will be in the Bhagavatam. He will rest in the Bhagavatam and asks him to spread the word that whoever reads or studies Bhagavatam, they will have the same effect of visiting and spending time with him. And thus, Krishna departs. So, Uddhava goes to the Himalayas, to the Badrikashrama to do his penance. And here, while the Yadavas are fighting, because Arjuna had gone with Krishna, so Krishna sends Arjuna before he is shot by the hunter to try and mitigate whatever is the fight happening between Yadavas and to look after the women of the Yadavas who are fighting. There Arjuna also gets involved and he starts fighting, trying to suppress these people. And then once Krishna dies, Arjuna becomes totally powerless. All his arrows become powerless. He's completely easily overpowered by ordinary people. So he comes back sad and dejected, comes back to Yudhishthira and gives him the sad news that Krishna has gone. I say, how did you know Krishna has gone? The moment my power was all gone, all my weapons became useless. I became a very ordinary soldier. Then I realized all this time I was great because Krishna was holding my hand. He was doing everything and I was only the face for him. So he is sad. And Yudhishthira sees that this is the time to let go. So he makes Parikshita the king and all the Pandavas along with Draupadi. They leave and they go for the Himalayas, for Swargarohana. And then Parikshita becomes a famous king. And then we know the story. Once he goes on a hunt and then he meets Kali. The Kali Yuga has started. The Kali gets into his crown because gold was one of the places where he asked Kali can stay. And then he goes and picks up the snake and puts it on the Rishi, and the Rishi's son curses him. And then in 7 days, he is now listening to the Bhagavatam from Shuka. So till this it has come. And then Parikshita asks Shuka, you told all these stories, but I also heard that Krishna was there when my grandfather was there and he was there during the big war. Tell me something about Krishna. The moment the word Krishna is heard by Shuka, he goes into Samadhi. And then after a while, when he comes out of Samadhi, he's in tears of gratitude. And then he says, this is what I've been waiting to tell you. All that I told so far, all the stories, all the jnana, all the knowledge is just a prologue. The real story starts now. I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you want to know about Krishna. I will now tell you in detail the entire Krishna's life. That we will see in our next season. Yeah. the whole Krishna Avatara. We will come back after the Shravan Mas and then we will look into it. Okay. So from tomorrow, the Shravan Mas starts. So Shravana is a very good time to worship Shiva. Shiva is the epitome of contentment. And this is the month of contentment. Month to realize that everything is so abundant. In our life, we've got so much. Realizing the abundance in our life is Shravan Masa. And it's also called Varsha Ritu, where nature is automatically doing Abhishekam to the earth. So you also participate by doing Abhishekam. You know, they say Vishnu Alankara Priya, Shiva Abhisheka Priya. Shiva needs just some water. He is happy with it. So during these times, we do Rudrabhishekam and worship Shiva. We'll also be doing a few of these Abhishekams and you can all join with us online. Or if you are able to do, you can do it at your own home, chant Om Namah Shivaya, listen to Rudram or chant Rudram. Yeah. So a lot of you have registered for that. It won't be on Facebook, that only be through a Zoom link. The link will be sent to you. Whoever wants to attend, you can. It will be at the same time, between 6:30 to 7:30, Monday evenings it will be there. Also on Saturdays mornings, it will be at 11 a.m. All these are UK time. Yeah. So we will see you there. So have a good break and do sadhana, because Dakshinayana has started and Shravana is a good month for doing sadhana as well. Okay, let's do some Shanti mantras and we can close. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkhabhat bhavet. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jai Gurudev.